Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, before I begin, recently I had a discussion with a young politician, and he said to me, you know, Roger has a particular style of people, General Secretary. Well, be careful. Coming out to Roger Clark, of course, you know, in one sense a privilege. On the other hand, one not seeking any way to compete either in style or volume, or fortunately we're not on the same subject. But good presentation, Roger. This you have a diplomatic passport for the special types. Mr. Speaker, it's appropriate that as I speak in this section of the budget debate, the fiscal section, I express my appreciation to the Leader of the Opposition, the confidence he has shown in me, and to my colleagues for the privilege of participating in this section. May I also acknowledge the Member of Parliament from East and Westmoreland, where I have some roots. He's trying to fall in a very big shoes, and sometimes he slips a bit, and sometimes, but I'm not. And to my colleagues for the support they have given me over the years in here, it's of some note, Mr. Speaker, for me that this is my 21st year in Parliament. Not unbroken, and regret, but it was always by election and not by appointment. To my constituents who have shown the faith, kept the faith with me throughout good times and bad times. In fact, my third term in Northwest St. James is of significance. This is a seat that many would have thought was recognized once as the legacy seat for the People's National Party, from the late A.G.S. Coombs and my friend and outstanding parliamentarian, Sir Howard Cook. But to my support team, the election day workers, management team, supervisors, contributors, and the many faithful supporters have combined to form almost an invincible political team in this constituency on behalf of the Jamaica Labour Party, which was a party founded from the struggles of the working people of this country. To my family, who have made the sacrifices that have allowed me to remain active in political life. Mr. Speaker, it is fair to say, and this applies to pretty much all of us, if we didn't have the support, if we don't have supportive families, political life could become quite untenable, a fact that we often overlooked. I thank my wife and my two kids for their support throughout these years. Mr. Speaker, presentation in this section allows some flexibility in delivery in the fiscal side. However, I will focus on the areas for which I have some primary responsibility, namely housing, water, infrastructure, transport in all its facets and forms. I focus on them because these are subject areas that, if managed with appropriate policies and programs, have the capacity to establish a platform for sustainable growth, increased wealth, and an improved quality of life for all our people. The challenge, Mr. Speaker, is to find the right mix of policies, the legislative framework, and the programs that will achieve growth in a timely manner without impairing our fiscal balance. The need to maintain macroeconomic stability and a satisfactory fiscal balance is agreed by all. But, Mr. Speaker, on the details of the People's National Party economic program, we do differ. And the member from Northeast Manchester has already detailed the critical areas of concern for Jamaicans. Mr. Speaker, classical monetary policy with a focus on precipitous devaluation cannot achieve the objectives of development and prosperity for our people. We have been there before, and we have seen it elsewhere. It will not and cannot work. What is more likely is continued contraction and stagflation. A growth due to devaluation and inflation is not sustainable economic policy. If the People's National Party government continues on this trajectory, there could be significant social upheaval and rejection. We must find policies to grow the real economy now. It cannot be inflation, devaluation-driven growth. It may help to balance the accounts, but it is creating even further imbalance in the lives of our people. The government speaks of balance the people's lives, but what is happening is only an attempt to balance the books. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, at this time, While we can commend our people for their tolerance in what is a most difficult economic time for all Jamaicans, we in this House must be careful how we interpret this tolerance. If the government continues in this program, there could be, at some point in time, a rebound demand for services and expectations. Mr. Speaker, I put it to this Honourable House that the current so-called tolerance is really an understanding, is really a sense of apathy and hopelessness. And this is committed, and we are committed on this side to indicating new ways and effective ways to break the cycle. Indeed, what I sense among our people is an ever-declining level of expectations by the larger number of the population. I have listened to our Minister of Finance, and I did not see any hope, vision, or plan to bring about sustained growth and development. What we heard was more of the same. Some piecemeal measures aimed at the poor without being transformative and without the capacity to change their circumstances. The vision that our minister speaks of in his presentation would appear to be a nightmare for many Jamaicans. The way we have been operating in the last 25 years has not worked, and only a quantum shift in government's operation and governance can change Jamaica at this time. This government has proven that they lack the method to bring about the change. They are proving to be good bookkeepers for a change, but extremely bad managers. We need good managers and financial controllers who understand the debt management process, growth and change management, not just good bookkeeping. We on this side intend to lead the charge for transformative changes and solutions the country needs and demands it. Mr. Speaker, for the last 25 years, we have failed to satisfy the need for change and growth and development in the area of infrastructure. It is important to note that for the last 25 years, the party on that side has served for 21 as government. Hence, the significant burden of failure rests at the feet of this government. It is important to note that in 25 years, the last 25 years, 25 years of government, your party has sat in the seat of government for 21. And indeed, I will repeat, the significant burden of failure rests at the feet of the party that forms the government. In these 21 years of your tenure, Mr. Speaker, mismanagement, lack of direction, and leadership, but more importantly, you have shattered the hopes and dreams and aspirations of our people. These have been crushed by the failures of the day, and the growing apathy and hopelessness continue to start the land. I will take for Mr. Speaker to look at the housing sector. Mr. Speaker, housing starts in a modern economy is one of the key indices of economic activity. And in our own society, it is a good indicator of how we are impacting on the quality of life of our workers. For some time now, we have spoken of a need for at least 10,000 housing solutions per annum. In 2011, a major effort by the Housing Agency and in collaboration with the private sector, we achieved housing start of some 6,405 and laid out a trajectory to achieve the 10,000 solutions by 2013. However, statistics now show that starts are measly 2,896 in 2013. The Housing Agency of Jamaica has imploded. The National Housing Trust is in turmoil, drained of resources to cover the debts that we have invoked over many years. Mr. Speaker, housing demand is significant. The quality of housing stock, especially in inner city communities and informal settlements, is deplorable. And you, as a member of Central St. James, is fully aware of the quality of housing stock in many of the communities that you seek to represent. It needs serious and urgent attention. Historically, of course, Mr. Speaker, housing construction by government, as formulated, has been a victim of a controversy for various reasons. But history, Mr. Speaker, must not become a millstone around our necks. Rather, should, as experience, teach us how to do it in better ways. The challenge we face is to design a housing policy, a regulatory framework, and a program that will stimulate development in this sector without burdening the taxpayer and impairing our fiscal balance. Indeed, we need some transformative program and thinking, not just transformative in terms of systems and physical resources, but also the transform thinking of policymakers and stakeholders who must change their approach if we are ever to develop a modern housing stock in vibrant communities. I want to look at a number of areas, Mr. Speaker, that offers development along these lines. First, Minister, I think we need to promulgate a comprehensive housing policy. Much work was done in this area, and several of the professionals who worked on this particular program happened to be from that side. The University of the West Indies and the University of Technology Building Department combined to start the work. I'd urge the Minister to look at what we have. It is now stuck at the Ministry of Finance. Complete what can be done and bring it to this House. I think this country now needs a comprehensive housing policy. Policy that must ensure there is a framework for sustainable development in the sector that will satisfy existing demand and reverse urban decay. Some of the programs I'd like to put on the table, Mr. Speaker, a critical program that can begin the process of increasing the stock and availability is a private-public partnership program. Such a policy was studied, documented, and approved by the Cabinet of the last Jamaica Labour Party administration, which merely concluded what was started by a previous administration. The private-public partnership offers the opportunity to bring major investment in the housing sector, combining public land with private capital, taking pressure off the taxpayers and for delivering houses to working people. This, Mr. Speaker, is a solution without the spending of any public dollars. Having completed the policy, we initiated at least 2 projects which currently face serious administrative problems: Green Pond in Central St. James and the Bernard Lodge program in St. Catherine. Both areas have a high level of unmet demand for housing. These programs would have brought on stream about 2,000 new units. Work started in terms of marketing for Bernard Lodge. We still await when anyone can receive any of those units. I accept, Mr. Speaker, that we have administrative challenges. They can be resolved, and they should be resolved, as this kind of activity which is required to grow the sector and provide housing, and by extension, grow the economy. It is clear that the housing agency bundled the activity in these 2, and the cost is now going to go beyond what was affordable by many of the workers. Mr. Speaker, let me say very clearly, like any new program, private-public partnership programs need intensive, focused monitoring in its early stages in order to ensure that an efficient system evolves which can inspire confidence from the investment community and promote further development in the medium term. So far, we have failed in implementation. We need to go again and examine how we can proceed. There are many private sector entities that would invest in housing if these are managed with integrity and transparency. There is no room, I'm not saying it happened, but there is no room for petty partisan politics. If we find a will to be objective, rather than be partisan, we have the people to deliver affordable housing under this program. The second item I'd like us to look at, Mr. Speaker, and comment to the ministry, which can be a major growth initiative in the housing sector, is the development of a secondary mortgage market. It is a fact, Mr. Speaker, that some $11.4 billion has been extracted from the National Housing Trust. That is not in dispute. But if we are thinking in a holistic manner, we should look at ways and means of restoring capital to the housing market. It is therefore important that we seek to develop the regulatory framework that would foster the development of a strong secondary market, which may very well restore to the housing sector more than $11 billion in capital, which has been extracted through from the Housing Trust. And I take the opportunity to remind the Honourable House that it was the initiation of such a program by the Jamaica Mortgage Bank under my administration back in 2009-2010 that resulted in the dramatic and yet welcome fall in mortgage rates from an average of 14.6% to 9.6%. That's a historical fact. A small secondary market was initiated with the credit unions, and immediately after the credit unions announced their fall in mortgage rates, the commercial banks followed. The secondary market has the potential to bring capital and initiate development in the housing sector. We are fully aware on this side of what happened in North America with the secondary markets and led to an international financial crisis. But we can ensure with the regulatory framework we put in place that this should not happen in our situation, as we can avoid these well understood and established pitfalls that happened in North America and affected Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the AIG. Mr. Speaker, mortgages can be converted into financial instruments. Even sections of the National Housing Trust portfolio could become valuable instruments and increase the capital in the housing trust. At the upper end of the quality mortgages, 7%, and the joint markets, if these can be included in financial instruments, it will provide the opportunity for long-term investors, like pension funds, to buy into mortgages and expand the capital available for housing. The National Housing Trust and other mortgage companies have valuable capital that can be reinvested in housing. Mr. Speaker, this, of course, is very dependent on maintaining a stable macroeconomic framework, including a relatively stable currency. Our failure to think of creative financial programs to generate investment would appear to be because of a long-standing infatuation of this government with high interest rates, devaluation, and inflation. Now that they have adopted the bookkeeping techniques of the IMF, we are still at a loss for growth. Time for new thinking and transformative change it is. It requires some new people. The third component of what I think could provide a suite of activities for housing development, Mr. Speaker, is the concept of reverse mortgages. I believe the time is ripe for such development of legislation and regulations to facilitate a reverse mortgage regime. There are thousands of formerly middle-income successful professionals, especially those who served in the public sector, whose pension benefits have condemned them in the rest of their life to poverty and marginalization. Yet they own valuable property which they acquired before pre-retirement. Mr. Speaker, reverse mortgage could restore dignity to some of Jamaica's finest, who contributed so much to our country but have so little to live on at this time. This could also lead, Mr. Speaker, to providing a path to reduce urban decay and general reduction in the quality of our housing stock, as a significant number of such real estate are in places like Vineyard Town, Hagley Park, and other mid-town regions, which were once homes of successful middle-income Jamaicans. They acquired these properties before their retirement. Currently, the primary interest in these real estate are overseas-based siblings who have only emotional interest and will leave the house after the owner's passing to be squatted in and to begin the process of decay. Even they pass before they pass on. These areas, if acquired by investors after the passing of current owners, are likely to be developed into quality housing and where redefined maybe offices. But it would reduce the growing incident of urban decay and could spur rejuvenation in some of our mid-town and inner-city regions. Mr. Speaker, we need some new thinking for growth and development, and the reverse mortgage program is one that could bring this kind of activity to bear on the housing sector. It is urgent that we find ways and means to bring into the entire process private capital, which has to be the engine of growth at a time of difficulty as we are currently experiencing. We on this side will seek transformation, not bureaucracy or good bookkeeping. We have the vision and the leadership, the energy and the foresight to make those changes. Finally, Mr. Speaker, a smaller program but one that still would contribute significantly to the growth process and to improving our housing stock. But this would require some funding from our capital program. But given the nature of the proposal and the target group I'm thinking of, I think we could find funding within the $99 billion capital we have, not additional capital. In this year, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at and urging the ministry to reactivate the housing fund under the Housing Act and capitalizing it in order to bring relief to thousands of humble Jamaicans and contribute to growth and bring about greater poverty relief than many of the current programs being used for poverty relief. Food for the poor houses are good, but they cannot be the only answer to the housing stock problem for the poor in this country. I say, Mr. Speaker, it's apparent from the level of informal development that low-income families can build their own homes with minimal resources. We should seek to provide them with a planned legal framework in which to do so and to allow for development of working people's homes. The concept I put on the table, Mr. Speaker, is one that I like to dub procure and build. Essentially, we're seeking collaboration, whether with the private sector or through the ministry's housing agency, as a development agency, to provide a housing lot. Depending on the location, we could identify lots from anywhere of $1.5 to $2.5 million. In terms of inner city communities where there is already existing basic infrastructure, the lots could be even less expensive. Greenfield lots.
Mr. Warmington. You may see the lady. Sorry about that, Dr. Chang. Your colleague contravened all right, the Speaker's order.
Okay,
continue.
He was attracted by the lady, but we understand. Mr. Speaker, the concept is fairly simple. Let us seek to provide a building lot. In an urban center, we are trying to replace urban decay. Lots could be much less expensive. In greenfield areas, you could get to as high a cost as $2.5 million. Infrastructure, that's the cost of the infrastructure. In an urban center, I said, where you already have road, light, and water, you need cleaning up and repair, the lot could come out at a cost of $1 to $1.5 million. In a greenfield center, we'd have to go for as high as 2.5, maybe a bit more. Add to the cost of that building materials of up to $750,000. So you create a mortgage of between $2.2 and $3.5 million. Under the Housing Fund and the Housing Act, which allows you up to 6-year mortgages, an interest rate of about 2%, you could provide that individual access to a home for mortgages of less than $5,000 a month. I'm sure if the family is provided with pre-approved plans and use the Housing Act to ensure they have titles, because much of the problem downtown, which we allude to so often as garrisonization, is because we did not complete the work on the Housing Act and ensure they had titles. As you're aware, Minister, we have been working, I'm sure you're doing it now. We started work with you, but I was there to try and get titles for many of those homes downtown were built in the 60s and some in the 70s. Ensure at the very start the titles are available. And ensure the families build their own homes. And let us pause here, Mr. Speaker, because shared work is not alien to Jamaican culture. Rural Jamaicans come together often to work on their farms, share days' work. If you identify 50 housing lots downtown and identify the 50 families, they will come together and build their own homes at a much lower cost than we now do by contracting. And we can begin the process of alleviating the urban decay and the housing shortages. Naturally, we'll want some supervision, but with people of integrity. so we don't get the usual thing of people thieving the material and going home. All right? And I'd like to include, for social intervention at this level, Jamaica Social Investment Fund, SGC, NGOs, that they introduce enterprise activity for these people. Many of these individuals with small capital will begin business as will earn them far more than the $5,000 a month they require to pay when they are not minimum wage workers. But bear in mind, at the level of mortgage I'm alluding to, we can in fact, a minimum wage earner can pay the mortgage. The Housing Act, which by some looking out to say was abused and maybe has acquired some nefariousness because of the nature of the downtown constituencies, is a powerful act which is designed to bring solutions. We must not be afraid to use it, but do so in a manner that is transparent and with integrity. Engage the social organization, the churches, the community-based organizations, organizations of faith that would work with these communities to ensure we have a dynamic, low-income community that is devoid of the kind of features we now have. Informal settlers, Mr. Speaker, have demonstrated the capacity to build quality housing with limited resources. And since we are from Montego Bay, I'm not speaking of those who earn large income from other areas. I'm speaking of humble people who over time build themselves by hard work and dedication and shared community labor, good quality homes in there for themselves. The community labor is not alien to our culture, Mr. Speaker, and I suggest we capitalize on it. With the current Strata Act, which we modified and has now been in place, and the minister responsible for it is over there, and I understand he's working assiduously to bring on stream the Townhouse and Common Areas Act. We could even use the same principle in building multifamily units, because at this rate of mortgage, it could be done. But of course, as I said, it would be limited. And I will mention a figure. If you, I'm sure you can find $2 billion in the $99 billion. By redirection, this funding has to come from within the existing budget. And I'm asking that be redirection. In a minute. Within the existing budget. I've emphasized throughout my presentation, we are not going to, I will help you identify it because I think it's an important enough program to redirect some of the funding. A $2 billion Jamaican dollars could bring relief to 1,000 or more families. And that is the kind of relief that will make a bigger difference than some of the programs we are now doing. So I'm quite aware, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister, that we have to maintain the fiscal balance. And that every program I've mentioned, take note of that fact. But in the area we are referring to, at the very lowest level of the socio-economic grouping, the government of Jamaica will have to do some prioritization. But I'm confident if it is efficiently implemented and we can demonstrate with integrity and transparency such a program, international assistance would come into play at a later stage. Let us start the process, and we will need mutual appreciation, understanding, work together with leadership in the community. We can, in fact, bring about improvement in these areas. The housing stock in our inner city communities, in rural Jamaica, and in informal settlements is deplorable for too many of our people. We need to approach it more aggressively. Our people have the capacity for hard work when they are satisfied with the rewards. They can be creative, innovative, and cooperative, but they must see the reward at the end of the day. Given the legal framework, our culture can solve the problem.
The speaker's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member's time be extended sufficient to allow him to complete his presentation.
The question is that Dr. Chang be allowed to finish his presentation. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Dr. Chang.
Thank you, and thank my colleagues for the extension. Government needs, Mr. Speaker, to facilitate the progress and give our people a chance to be great. It is government over many years that has been an impediment to some of our people's creativity. The entire process, taxation and security efforts make our people, poor people, feel oppressed by government, and I use the term collectively. And the scourge of persistent poverty remains among them. One said, that under certain programs there was a great transfer of wealth from poor to rich. I won't go into the names. But indeed, Mr. Speaker, more critically, it was more your colleague right here, Mr. Tweets. Mr. Maxwell claimed paternity for that statement. Late John Maxwell, a good writer. Housing Act allows the Housing Fund to give 60-year mortgages, Mr. Speaker. And this, with in an active housing fund, can be used as a vehicle to resolve some of the critical problems affecting our poor people throughout Jamaica. I think it needs to be examined and pursued as part of our housing program and part of the solution to economic development. The final thing I'd comment on, Mr. Speaker, not strictly within my portfolio, is the hurdle to simplify our complicated and cumbersome approval process. While the Housing Act gives us some leverage in the housing sector, I think it is appropriate timing for the Housing Ministry, local government ministry, relevant state agencies like NEPA to design a simple and transparent and efficient system for simple development. There are some discussion put on the table in prior times. I had mentioned one or two, but I think this needs some study and discussion to come up with an effective solution now. It is necessary that we facilitate and encourage private sector development at this point in time. The budget, the revenues of the Jamaica government do not allow us to spend money loosely on many areas that are critical. I remember a suggestion made at some point that we ought to register professional architects and engineers who could then sign off on buildings up to a certain size within this given development area. In other words, if an area is designed for single-family homes, a professional architect will sign off like a licensed electrician signs off an electrical plan, or a lawyer signs off on documents for certain activities. And once they have signed off, they pay their required fees. And of course, if engineering is required, so too does a professional engineer. Having signed off, they pay their required fees to local authorities and start construction. The knowledge that such people have is the same that everybody in the various agencies who spend months and months looking at this thing have, and sometimes they have more knowledge. And if professionals sign off on inadequate or wrong plans and start construction, then they could be deregistered publicly, like we deregister a lawyer for unethical behavior, or a doctor similarly. What we'll have to ensure, of course, is that the local authorities, and I'm sure my colleague will speak to that more, and those who have experience in local government, would be provided with a strong professional corps of inspectors who could inspect the construction from throughout its development. But they should be given the authority that if one proceed with construction without contacting the local planning authority, they will have the authority to not only stop the building, but even pull it down if necessary. Currently, it's a long process in court. It doesn't make sense. So we'll have to revise the entire law. The charge is to give them the right to begin, the facility to start work quickly. Plans can be approved by professional architects and engineers within the scope identified by the planning authorities. But the local authority needs the authority to intervene if they breach the regulations, intervene effectively, which means they might have to pull down the building if it's so necessary. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the housing, I want to look at the housing agency for a brief moment. The housing agency, which was rebranded from National Housing Development Corporation, I think plays a very vital role in leading the fray in the development of low-income housing. It needs to be revitalized. I note that having gone through almost an implosion, the ministry have taken some steps to do some work on revitalizing the institution. We need, Mr. Speaker, through the housing agency to continue the program of upgrading informal settlements, giving financial empowerment to these dwellers, unleashing their entrepreneurial potential, and adding wealth to the country and increasing its tax revenue. It is unfortunate that we have reduced the scope of this program, as the idea originated with the current portfolio minister. Providing titles without infrastructure is not satisfactory. It merely shifts the blame to the residents seeking help from parish council, public works, MP, and other individuals who do not have the resources nor the capacity to provide satisfactory infrastructure. And in so doing, you do not realize the full value of the investment of the individual. Unless you put in the road, basic infrastructure, doesn't have to be a fancy road, although we will put in some fancy ones. But unless there's basic access, water supply, and power, the value of the property cannot be realized. Right? So we can take steps to do that. The current challenge with HAJ, Housing Agency of Jamaica, I say I put back the progress made in developing the skills required for regularizing informal settlements and building low-income homes. I hope we can recover. The development of this nature cannot be an exercise in politics or expediency. Technocrats who have been training for years in the particular field should be allowed within the law and the policy and regulations to do their jobs independently. This is the only way we can get dynamic and efficient development in the sector with a government agency. In reforming the housing agency, I comment to the minister, we find a way of putting in place the housing division from the Ministry of Housing, which would lead to greater efficiencies. One of the problems we have is that in many sectors we have several little groupings doing the same work. So you have the Ministry division building some houses. We now have the housing agency doing some. We have NHT doing some. We have UDC doing some. And I'm not sure where it's not doing some. I think Ministry of Agriculture might be doing some as well. This kind of multiplicity of small agencies is inefficient, unnecessarily costly, and will not prove effective in the short term or the long term. To consolidate your professional skills in one large, efficient agency, pay them well, and provide the programs required makes much more sense than what we are doing now. The housing agency could become the lead agency for housing development in the public sector. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I make two comments here. At one stage, with much less staff than the project division of the Ministry of National Housing Trust, we're doing far more housing starts than the Housing Trust, with far less staff than the project divisions of the Housing Trust. In addition to that, the housing agency had reached a stage where private developers were talking to them about managing their projects, because in the latter year they had acquired a level of expertise which was appreciated by those they work with. And they too could supervise private developers who come under the Housing Act. These are ways, Mr. Speaker, we need to reform our approach to housing. The need for housing is well easily identified. The quality of our stock is poor. We need to find a solution within the current fiscal framework to provide adequate housing for poor people and all Jamaicans. Not just poor Jamaicans. Young professionals in Jamaica today cannot find houses to buy. Many are staying at home or migrating. The need for housing stock is urgent, and bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, that housing construction is one of the few things that generate extensive increased employment and bring about significant real growth in the economy. The other sector I wish to move on to, Mr. Speaker, is to take a look at water. I see my colleague has moved on. Water, Mr. Speaker, is one of the basic requirements for sustainable development. The Water Commission used the term water is life. It is indeed life. But before I proceed, Mr. Speaker, to examine some of the concerns in this sector, I'd like to take the opportunity to extend my sincere condolences to the family of Mr. Tony Lee, a construction worker on the Tullow Spring Rehoboth water line who died in an accident out there, and to extend my sympathy to his 6 colleagues who were hurt in that particular accident working on this project under the Jamaica Water Sector Supply Improvement Project. It was most unfortunate, and I want to thank and commend all the workers who have been trying under their very best to maintain and bring water to the people of Jamaica under very difficult circumstances, aggravated by the drought and sometimes by failing policies of the government. We note with concern that the capital allocation for water has been reduced by about near $4 billion. We understand the need to spend within certain limits, but it is still troubling. For more than one person, Mr. Speaker, it took me considerable negotiation with the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the Department in the Ministry of Finance, and the Inter-American Development Bank, who was then one of our prime partners, to ensure that water received within the public sector investment program adequate fiscal space for development of an efficient water system. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, among the reasons for the cut, I understand, is that in the last 2 years, despite of having a $10 billion space, the money was not spent, and therefore it was easy for the Ministry of Finance to, in fact, reduce the fiscal space. In fact, our spokesman alluded to that yesterday. When some multilateral projects are in place, you budget for them, and if money is not spent, you will, in fact, find space being created at the end of the budget year. In this case, one could not blame the procurement process. And I asked the Minister to take a look at how his department and agency is functioning. Because in the case of the Jamaica Water Sector Improvement Program, for example, which is nearly 3 years behind schedule, when the government was elected, that project was already procured and planned, and the money was in place. So there was no need for enormous length of delay. In fact, I heard that board took all kind of times, meetings, looking at all kinds of things that was not necessary or needed, and therefore the project delay was certainly unnecessary. And one must understand that that has increased the severity of the impact of water supply in the carpet area during the dry season. Had that work been completed, we would not be in the position we are in today. There will be some challenges, Mr. Speaker, so I'm not going to deny that. That project alone would not have settled the water problem in the KMTR or the North Coast. And I comment on both. In addition to that program, funding was there for work on some 29 facilities in the carpet area. In the progressing of that work, of course, there will be some interruptions. So we understand that, and that work is continuing. That went out somewhat late too. The construction of an additional treatment plant and the recovery plant was also part of that and should have started by now. That is nowhere on the horizon from the plans projected by the government. But the carpet area and St. Catherine is nearly half our population. We need to plan an appropriate water supply to satisfy demands. It is a critical part of the development process, an important part of the quality of life for people. In the case of the North Coast, tourism must have water to develop. The fallout in the North Coast, Mr. Speaker, and you suffer from it on a regular basis in your constituency, I'm aware, was not just because of the increased hotel rooms, which contributed. And hotels use an enormous amount of water. I don't think many people appreciate that a single large hotel will demand up to 2 million gallons of water per day. Right? In fact, when we're doing the line to Lucy, that's what Iberostar asked to reserve. They currently use about 1.5 million. So it is, in expanding the hotel industry, one must consider the availability of adequate water supply. You will not get guests in Jamaica if they go to a hotel which has no water. The minister is right there listening. So work on the North Coast and Negril area, we expected, should have started. And it has started, but the capacity to do so, to do both the North Coast and the carpet area exists. And while the funding was there, I hold the ministry accountable for not having proceeded in a timely manner. I say it, Mr. Speaker, because the entire project itself, when we were faced with the drought in 2009, it was far more severe than now. We're able to, despite of all the challenges laid out in the procurement process, to negotiate and start what was the largest single engineering project for water, and up to that time, the largest single project in Jamaica, for $250 million US within a 12-month period. We started negotiation in October 2008, and 2009 pipes were in Bogwalk. if we set out with the commitment and the will, we can achieve efficiency and speed on critical programs. Cutting the capital budget for water may have been part of what is necessary by the Ministry of Finance to meet its targets, but it's an unfortunate and something that should not have been done, and was not, even if it was done this year, had the Water Commission, backed by the ministry, moved efficiently and quickly on their programs, would have had the projects in place that would have brought relief to thousands of Jamaicans. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, as we here talk about cutting the budget by $4 billion, some other issues are rising. I understand in Port Antonio, we are busy building sewer lines. Remember from there, with no sewer plant. And I speak to, since you're speaker, you're here on behalf of your colleague, I think you have to ask him what has happened to the, where's the plant going? Because we are going to end up building sewer lines short Port Antonio, and once they make connection, there's no sewer plant. I'm aware that the original site was captured, but the ministry has a responsibility to move quickly to identify appropriate site and to ensure that while the funding is there, the plant is built on time, or the poor people of Port Antonio who now have received a better supply and expecting sewer treatment will not have a sewer treatment plant, although the lines are there. This is the kind of inefficiency and error that we cannot tolerate. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, I'm aware some of our multilateral partners who fund us significantly, whether by policy or programs, are getting very uncomfortable with the quality of implementation of programs in Jamaica. Too many of our funded programs take too long, run over budget, across the board. I've said that. And this is among them. And if you speak to any of the multilateral funding agencies, some will say to you, Jamaica has had all the program we need to achieve sustainable development, but we have not implemented most of them. And even those that we have implemented, we have not done so in a manner that is efficient and satisfactory. Mr. Speaker, I'll reach out to my colleague on that side. We are willing to cooperate and look at any means to improve the process in implementation of projects in Jamaica. I think we can all agree this house. It has been one of the most singular, most challenging and difficult parts of the development process. We have to find a better solution because we have competent individuals. We have resources on occasions, but we seem to be able to fail to go through the process satisfactorily. We have to find a way. I know, Mr. Speaker, that the damming of the Rehoboth has come back on stream. As one man said to me, it's a 50-year-old idea. It's a 50-year-old idea that the damming of the Rehoboth Gorge. Right? As I indicated some time ago, it's not something that I thought was worthy of significant pursuit. Among our problems in this country, we have people who understand, have the knowledge, but when they are Jamaicans, we don't pay attention to them. The best reservoir knowledge about karstic limestone regions resides in people in Jamaica. Among them, Basil Fernandez of the Water Resources Authority. In fact, the cost overrun on the North-South Highway, which the Chinese have rescued us from, and we're happy for that. And this side, we are both happy that happened. But if you look at the original estimates, Minister, and I remember it very clearly, it was suggested we could have built that North-South Highway for some $88 million. It's going to cost about twice that, because somebody never read the Water Resources Authority report that clearly indicated where that fracture line was and the risk and cost involved in bypassing it or going over it. I have a copy of the report. It was done. No, it was done from 2005. Talk to your minister. Right? And the work was started, and it wasn't read. May I continue the work because the responsible minister, he continued a good program. But that report was not part of what he received. Someone needs to have looked at it. And while we would have pursued it, we would have known from day one the cost. The risk involved in the gorge, it may be worthwhile doing more intensive boring, but karstic limestone anywhere in the world is not good for damming, especially when you're near earthquake zone. Simple shifts, simple earth tremors, and all your water going to disappear on the ground. Fortunately, we'll get it back downstream. The aquifers downstream will collect the water and we get to pump it out in wells, which is where most of the water is stored. But it'll be quite an expensive thing to store a couple of billion gallons of water to recharge the wells downstream. You can recharge the wells much easier, quite frankly, Minister. And I think you should maybe introduce the Chinese construction company to those who have developed the hard rock drilling technique in the Blue Mountains. Hard rock drilling technique, while still under patent, is a modification of our drilling techniques to drill deep down and reach what you might call old water, much of which is guaranteed to be under the Blue Mountains. It's a heavy rainfall area. It is volcanic rocks. And if you pursue hard rock drilling, which again, the Water Resources Authority is aware of the personnel involved, at the time it was not, we could not establish a procurement by the kind of contract with them that would be necessary for them to build. But it will work a while, have them get the owners of the hard rock drilling technique linked with the contractors. If you put wells behind Pine Grove into Mavis Bank, and you're getting 10 to 15 million gallons of water out of 2 wells, you not only get enough water to continue the development to supply the corporate area over a long time, but you could generate significant power by inline turbines with this volume of water, which would make a lot of sense. It would be a lot less cheaper, and you would not have the ongoing cost of power supply that you will have elsewhere. Because when you have dams or treatment plants, you still use a lot of power to pump. You could also do the drilling to the east, near the Yallas Valley, and run that water only in the drought season into the existing Yallas pipeline. Either way, it is less expensive, and I think it's a more sure way of getting that water supply, additional water supply, out of the Blue Mountains that you need in the corporate area. I think it's a better deal, and I'd urge the Minister to examine this kind of activity. Nor should we dismiss the Mahogany Vale Dam, which have been studied for years and be examined by some of your newfound friends in the East. That too has potential, and they got all the studies. Right? Indeed. Right? I have not, Mr. Speaker. That's why I gave them copies of the entire studies done on the Mahogany Vale Dam, and they have been looking at it together. They are not people who act intemperately and will take their own time and find their own studies to find the justification for viability and otherwise. But fortunately, let's face reality, the Chinese are good friends at this point because they are the country with the most cash available. And they think long-term more than other countries as well. And since their centralized economy allows them to make decisions centrally, they're good partners for long-term investment. And we should talk to them. In the drought season, Mr. Speaker, I would say again, we need to move towards a point where we don't have water lockouts, because we have enough water in Jamaica to supply Jamaicans. What we need is the infrastructure, and that's why I say we need to put in place the required infrastructure, even when we are faced with fiscal challenges. Solved very simply, you know. I give you a simple example. Hopewell in St. Elizabeth, not in Hanover. They were without water for about 10, 12 years. We spent a long time drilling wells. They spent a long time drilling wells in the wrong place. But we put a well in there. It was pretty simple cost at the insistence of the minister. And we had to take out an order to do it to access the property. And now trucking of water is alien to a wide area of that constituency. I don't see the MP here this morning. But the entire Hopewell area, going almost back to Treasure Beach, no longer needs trucking. They're getting reliable water supply. And the well itself has the capacity to cover a wider swath than it is. Just have to increase the size of the pipe. This kind of activity is what is necessary. Oftentimes we get carried away with putting in a standpipe here, which goes dry in the dry season anyway, and extend the pipe, and it gives good political mileage. But we need to examine where we need the kind of infrastructure that will guarantee a reliable, continuous supply of water. I see my friend Van Sonti is looking on. He has a real challenge up in the hills, and that has to be dealt with and looked at a different way. But certainly somewhere like St. Elizabeth, South Trelawney have some quality, reliable supplies, need infrastructure. These are productive areas of the country. Places like Quasha River, Agualta Vale, White River, Whitehall in Newmarket are areas we had looked at the required plans to put them in place and identify areas of funding. They should not have shifted the funding in those situations. The Water Commission, I just appreciate, Mr. Speaker, have to operate within the established fiscal guidelines. But they do have funding to spend, and if they spend it timely and efficiently, we can get through most of the programs. The K factor, which is part of the bill, of every water bill you get, will provide some $45 to $55 billion over a 15-year period. That is approximately $500 million US. It can make a major impact on the quality of our water supply. We have had loan funding from the commercial banks. I refer to the Jamaica Water Sector Improvement Program, which is still ongoing. Unfortunately, it should have been finished already. That was $250 million US. The IDB lent us money, and we're not using it, even when we're having severe drought throughout the carpet area. That funding, as far as I can see in the budget, has not been touched in 2 years. I don't think our friends are going to be very happy with us, and we should not be happy either. Because when you are in an urban center and you don't have water, it's a miserable process. And all the MPs from the, in particular downtown, the carpet area, can attest to that. And funding is there. We ought to find a way to get that program going and ensure that we get reliable water supply in the carpet area. The crew funding, Credit Enhancement Fund, is a unique fund, can do a lot with storage. We need to move on it. It needs, Mr. Speaker, efficient and speedy implementation on these major program areas. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the failure to implement significant capital programs on time and in an efficient manner, I'd like to comment briefly on the rapid response unit. I want to put it to the Minister that we had examined the feasibility of transferring all these trucks to the local authorities. I still submit it's a better way to truck water when we have to. I think the national body should concentrate on the large programs, get their projects efficiently implemented and on time, that you can have more people getting piped water to their homes. But while we need trucking, the local authorities are much better prepared to truck water. They are familiar with the details of their communities. They can react faster and far more efficiently to water shortages than can a central ministry do. The work was done. We had the board of survey, look at the rolling stock. They are ready to be transferred. I do not think we should hold on to them. The names sound nice, but they don't work for water. If the parish councils had those trucks, they'd be better maintained, because the mechanics out there, when they want water, go and get the truck working, and you can get water to the communities. I commend it. The local authorities have that. The only thing that should be central, Mr. Speaker, is that we could organize through the Ministry of Water that the Water Commission will receive its subvention to supply the trucks through the ministry. How will the accounting go? Because what you want to ensure is that when the trucks want water and the parish council sends it to the pipe, they get the water. Once they can have that in a reliable manner, they will get the water to people much more efficiently than a water commission, than a central water supply system.
How much are you working?
Oh, 20. 20. We had 20 working trucks on rapid response and 10 new ones we bought. But I was not urgent, I was not eager and active, I was eager in transferring them to the local authorities, as they were. The tanks are excellent, so even where the trucks themselves, which had serious mechanical problems, were not utilizable. The tanks are excellent water tanks, and if you put them in a local situation, people will transfer them to other truck heads. It is a much more efficient system, Minister, and we need to look at how we can do it better, and we need to incorporate our local authorities. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the program of reducing non-revenue water must be approached with some urgency. This country produces millions of gallons of water, but we lose about 65% on average. In some places as much as 70%, which means for the same amount of money you're spending now, you could get twice what you're doing, the amount of water you have. It will be difficult to reduce it to 5% like the Japanese, or even approach in a very short time the kind of accepted international level of 35 to 40%. But if we work assiduously at it, we can knock away 25% quickly. That would give you an additional 30 million gallons of water per day. Even in Mandeville, where we have a genuine shortage and need to activate wells down in the plains of St. Elizabeth to supply both St. Elizabeth and Mandeville. But just correcting water loss in Mandeville could double the supply in Mandeville at any point in time. In fact, the last investigation we had suggested that we're losing up to 70% of the generated water in Mandeville. So approaching Mandeville with that, yep. And there are other areas in Jamaica with that kind of loss. 70%, and it's very costly to pump up the hill. 70% from technical losses, some stealing, some leaking, all of that kind of activity. We need to implement the program of non-revenue water reduction aggressively and quickly. There are not many people who can do it, so we should find them, and even by negotiation, proceed to ensure we have a program in place. We have enough water. What we need is efficient management to ensure reliable supply to Jamaicans. With global warming and climate change, water is fast becoming a highly valuable commodity. It's an area where even multinationals wish to invest in. We have enough water for our people. We need to ensure we can manage what we have well, and at some point maybe get some to sell. The Water Commission, the governance of the Water Commission, Mr. Speaker, is my last point. The Water Commission and water is a very large, one of Jamaica's larger corporations. They have cash flow of some $25 billion. $25 billion. They have 3,000 facilities across the island. I said over 20. No, I know it's 25 billion, but I put over 20. All right? The writer put that in there. But in fact, the projection is $28 billion this year, and last year it was 23. All right? They have a staff of 2,100 across the island, and this needs to be managed like a large corporation. It can't be managed ad hoc. The NWC Act allows for 9 commissioners, and these should all be individuals who have an understanding of corporate governance and corporate business. It may be, Mr. Speaker, to ensure we get the quality we require, that we could make the Water Commission one of the first corporations where Parliament approved the chairman. But water is not a party issue. It affects all Jamaicans. And we need that efficient, quality water company to run the water company in Jamaica. And I allude to this here because there are 2 individuals I even speak that I don't even mind, who demonstrated outstanding quality service on the, as commissioners. One has a sister in this house, but she happens to be a senior vice president of one of our largest corporations. The other one heads up a large corporation when you were government the last time, currently heads up a large corporation. They showed an understanding and a quick grasp of the complexity of running a large corporation. When you put someone right there, BB, who don't understand it, in charge, then all kind of things go wrong, and nothing can get done quickly. It is, and I refer to 2 individuals, I don't think they're mind, Mr. No, yeah, we'll call the names, but there are 2 senior management individuals in this country. We need people like that. And maybe to get them, we need to bring them here sometime for the chairman. And the other pilot way, the Water Commission needs effective governance. And the board must understand the difference between policy and operation, and what corporate policy direction is required to make a company of this size function efficiently. Minister, it's not your responsibility. I'm sure you can advise your colleague. I think you understand exactly what I'm saying. We need new ideas, we need new plans and a vision to ensure that Jamaica has a satisfactory water supply system, and the people of Jamaica at all levels can benefit from quality water supply. We are at this point not in very bad order, Mr. Speaker. But you hear comments about differential rates, which would not be necessary if you get the system work efficiently. And individuals should be aware that we have what you call a lifeline limit. And many people don't know geographical difference is not appropriate, despite of the upper cost for Mandeville. Currently, Jamaica pays several rates for water. 3,000 gallons, which is 2,000 gallons above the World Health Organization limit, is the lifeline limit. Individuals using 3,000 gallons get a subsidy. The rates increase for every 2,000 gallons till you get to a very high rate of 10,000 gallons per month. And that's why your water bill shoots up when you have a leak. So we already have differential rates to allow for a national water system, so there's cross-subsidy. And I don't think anything is wrong with that. If we were able to get our supply up to all the population in a reliable way, we can in fact continue to provide water to all Jamaicans at a reasonable rate. The final area of my concern, Mr. Speaker, infrastructure, and in particular roads. But infrastructure involves roadways, our airports, and our seaports, air, sea, and land. Indeed, and rail. And I'm quite happy to use the term by our former minister. It's a multimodal if we are to go forward in a very constructive way. And I comment on that later. International trade is based on air and sea transport. And it has been shown that quality road development gives one of the highest rate of returns in the shortest time possible. That's a fact at a local level. And of course, rail can be an asset depending on what you're doing and where you're putting it. We therefore need to develop and articulate a comprehensive transport policy at this time. We need to look at Jamaica and again look at evolving a physical development plan minister. If we look back as far back as 1964 when the first physical plan was done, not a 2030 vision, a physical plan. It can provide a roadway for a pathway for effective management and development of our road infrastructure and settlement strategy. It is time to relook at a physical development plan. The last one was done, as I said, way back in 1964. It is still a very useful plan, but times have changed, population has grown, and we need to look at what is relevant today. Such plans are much longer lasting than regular economic plans. And I'm sure that you could get international help to look at a comprehensive transport plan, physical plan for Jamaica at this point in time. It would be appropriate that, in fact, your ministry take a look at that. And something that could last us for 25 years, and we can therefore follow a roadmap in terms of a development strategy, and not just piecemeal, a highway here, a road there, and so forth. The first plan, I remind you, was developed as way back in 1964 under the then administration of Sir Alexander Bustamante. Before I go into that aspect of thing, I note, Mr. Minister, that we're having serious problem with road transport in all areas. Not only because of bad roads, but right now in the corporate area, we have serious conflicts within the commuting public with the JUTC. Challenges faced for commuters includes students procuring safe, reliable, and affordable transportation, disabled, and the general public. Infrastructure and road infrastructure is like the circulatory system of the body. That's what will ensure productivity and a healthy economy. And when you get poor infrastructure and poor roadways, productivity is seriously impaired. Minister, we have to look how we can resolve it. The history of our bus system is well known. We have operated between corporate or publicly owned companies with an ad hoc system of private small operators, including legal and illegal operators. That is the system we have inherited, and not only perennial. The system has failed to satisfy the demand of the population, and have over the years impaired our productivity and the dignity of our commuting people. The current attempt to bring order to the system has some merits, but we should not disrespect the small operators who at one time was the backbone of the system. Those who have been denied renewal of their license, Mr. Speaker, were people who invested in rolling stock with the hope of continuing in the business. Mr. Speaker, as I said to the Minister, if in fact we are continuing to subsidize, in fact, as we see in the budget, major subsidy to JUTC, if removal of the franchise operators is going to make them viable, then why not use the subsidy, buy out the franchise holders? Because they are business people like everybody else. They are Jamaican business who invested their money and the faith that they're going to continue to have a business to operate. Buy them out of the subsidy and let the JUTC get the money. In the process, work with them through the Transport Authority, find them alternate routes, alternate business. As a government, we cannot treat small invest. In other words, you take them off the franchise routes. You can assign them new routes to Spanish Town, to Lynn State, elsewhere. You'll have, this is a matter for discussion. Whether you, what you pay them, what common sense member, when I say you compensate them instead of buy out them. If they find an adequate route for them, fine. If on the other hand you cannot place them in the system elsewhere, then you pay them off, like you did to NTC. You buy them out as you did to NTC when they take it to court. That if they're in, that what you're using to subsidize the bus company now. If you are subsidizing them, the same money. No. Do you need a subsidy still? That's not implication. No, no. We are not against reform. We welcome reform, but it must take place in an environment of equity and fairness, respecting those who have invested their time and money in the sector. There are small business people who have been there for years, and when we needed them, we used them. We must show them some respect, and we cannot be arbitrary and arrogant in dealing with them, Mr. Speaker. That's not correct. If we are sincere, we can find a way to do it better. The road, Mr. Speaker, as I said, is like a circulating system of the body. Will determine our productivity, security, and prosperity. But like the economy, the road system is in serious state of disrepair. We have had a Jamaica Development Infrastructure Program, which did some good work, despite of political attempts to diminish the success of the program. I noticed the government is attempting a similar program with a new name. But I'll say, Mr. Speaker, a rose by any name is still a rose. It must be recognized in the budget. While it must be recognized in the budget, and I repeat, Mr. Speaker, while the expenditure in any major program must be recognized in the budget, it is not necessarily the most efficient way to spend the money directly through the Ministry of Finance in a program like this. You are running it through the Ministry of Finance, and it's not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it. I wish, and I say, remember I started out by saying, Mr. Speaker, it must be recognized. And all I'm saying is not necessarily, and the member disagreed with me, that part of our problem is implementing major projects in this country. We don't do them efficiently and well. I wish you well on the program, look to working with you, and look forward to some roads in Montego Bay too. But we need to look comprehensive at how we can improve our entire road network. Mr. Speaker, part of what we could do is to reclassify the road network and determine engineering standards for each grouping. The current road maps of Jamaica show A, B, C, and parish council roads. We have all kinds of roads, housing estate roads, community roads, school roads, agricultural roads, and they're kind of scattered all over the place. I suggest that you lay out a plan which will include a highway system revolving around Highway 2000. That's part of our physical development plan for years, and you're implementing it, and Minister before me continued that. These, of course, would have linkages with other roads that should be classified as A, B, and C's, or whatever classification you wish, and lay out for the minimum standards of maintenance. We have no such activity today in road programs. The local authorities, of course, have to get adequate resources to deal with the community roads and separate this multiplicity of road authorities. National Works Agency deal with certain highway and certain A roads. Local authority deal with others in terms of maintenance. And in the process, set up an engineering team who would have the requirement, this responsibility to set the standards. And the local authorities must have access to their skills to ensure that we maintain standards. Strong engineering duties required. Our road system needs to be identified properly and be maintained properly. I am aware, Mr. Speaker, that we don't have all the money to do what we would like to do. But if we do it properly and efficiently, we can get much more for what little we spend. And that's critical to having an adequate road system. As we evolve and develop, then we can have a much better roadway system. I'd also like to comment to you, Minister, because I had the experience, and my colleague here might have done so, of driving on the new Sligoville upgraded road. But most people won't drive it at nights. It's too dark. Now you can't put street lights all along it. But there's an evolving, well, there's evolved a nice little technology using paint with photoluminescent pigments. You can use that Just paint that bright up at night. Use that to mark the roadway and the borders. If not quite well, you're going to do that then. Accepted, Minister. Because we need that kind of thing. They dig up the cat eyes. They dig up the cat eyes and take them up with trucks or anything. If you use, I don't know what they do. They dig them up all the time. In the context of our airport, Mr. Speaker, we have divested the Montego Bay Airport, and that's working well. We are in the process of divesting Norman Manley, and that makes sense. But we should not in any way dismiss, for the medium term, the suggestion by the member from Central Clarendon about the potential of Vernon Field. I would reiterate my support for this, because if we are to become a part of the international trading circle and in fact develop a global logistics hub, we need an airport that can accept long-haul flights. The current airports do not have the capacity to evolve to that level. Long-haul flights require 12 to 14,000 feet at least, and maybe even longer. This cannot be done in Montego Bay and Palisadoes. They will still have value, they'll still be functional. But for cargo and long-distance flights, we need a new airport at some point in time. Vernon Field is the ideal place for that. In addition, not only because, as we say, we are moving towards a global logistics hub, I reiterate our position for that. That concept evolved within government, and two of my colleagues spoke extensively on it, the member from Central Clarendon and the member to my right from North Central Philandro, who I'll refer to again, who spoke extensively on the development of the Kingston port and the neighboring Caymanas economic zone. Ideas that, if followed through, can bring significant and major development to the Carpathian and to Jamaica. The centers of wealth that are evolving is in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and the Far East. Places like Beijing, Shanghai, Delhi, and Dubai. We must be able to accommodate direct connections from these areas, and it will require new airport facilities. I am aware that Montego Bay is extending to 10,000 feet, and this will bring some significant benefits, but it will not be adequate to move in this direction. And while I'm not saying we can find the capital to build it tomorrow, we ought to keep it on the horizon and plan for this kind of activity that we're in this area. A logistics center with the proposed economic zone must have an airport of this magnitude if we are to be successful in this, in the short run. Mr. Speaker, seaports will be axis for development. It's the area of sea transportation is around what logistics hub evolve. Transshipment is central to logistics development. Jamaica's prime location is not debatable or challengeable, despite of efforts and structured moves for Cuba and DOMREP to participate. Jamaica is 200 kilometers from the main shipping lane. The Pirates of the Caribbean proved that many years ago. We are still the best location for shipping in the Caribbean, right? Captain Morgan proved it. That's why I became governor. I'm worried about the commitment of the government to the magnitude of the concept. I said two of our members spoke to it. My colleague from Clarendon actually had a document developed. And while we sometimes smile a little bit cynically when you say multimodal, it's an extent document, it's a concept initiated that started the full discussion on a logistics hub in Jamaica. He should be commended for that effort. Is that his personal thing? It's the Ministry of Transport and Works. We now use the term global logistics hub. That's universal, nothing wrong, but his multimodal transportation center was a concept evolved. It's the same concept. And in fact, is maybe a more direct term because you need air transport, you need sea transport, and you need an adequate highway system on land to link the various economic zones. And IT is part, but if you put an IT center in Mandeville, which could be, I don't know, I'm not going to, but I will say if you put an IT center and an education center, which Mandeville could become, and provide educated person, not only for Jamaica, but for all the world, then you need a good highway linking them. I'm not, you pursue your programs, I'm just emphasizing. Infrastructure is a critical part of any such development and has to be planned over the long term, right? You may need, some have indicated, some of the experts, have indicated that Goat Island is a better place to build a berthing facility for the super large ships. If you do it there, you may very well need a rail link from Goat Island to Kingston Harbour, which is a bigger and safer harbour, and therefore would accommodate the feeder ships that will carry products from the larger ships to the East Coast and South America. So the concept needs to be outlined to our people that they understand fully what we're doing. And I emphasize the coastal belt, Mr. Speaker, because while it may be repetitious in one sense, but I think this concept is so significant and could bring so much to this country, it needs repetition. It also needs to be understood by the investors that Parliament, as a Parliament, is satisfied with its development. We cannot have ask anyone to bring in here, while we can claim paternity at different points for different aspects and implementation rights. Nobody investing $2 billion US in Jamaica must have any doubt that anybody in leadership questions that investment. That's the basis for repetition. Right? So the divestment of Kingston Container Terminal must be pursued, and we ensure that the required infrastructure be put in place in order to optimize the use of this major asset. But, Minister, Kingston itself has advantages, which even if we cannot bring the super large ships here, we need to look at the corporate area, inner city redevelopment, to provide economic activity to rejuvenate the entire downtown area. Kingston is our capital city. Historically and today, it is Jamaica's premier city, despite I'm Montagonian. We have had significant urban decay downtown. We must put in place a comprehensive plan to redevelop downtown and restore the dignity downtown and provide jobs for our people. Section of downtown is an embarrassment, should be an embarrassment to some of us in this house. We need to find a way to bring back life and economic activity to downtown. Reduce. Part of it, there's one other critical part of getting it going downtown, and I don't apologize for that, seriously. Part of any development of us becoming a central trading center would be to ensure, and this will not cost any money, Mr. Speaker. I'll let you two discuss the neighbors. I'll let the neighbors have talk. Mr. Speaker, that's neighborly banter. We'll leave that alone. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, while we work, and I commend that we become more decisive and clearly articulate the comprehensive position on our global logistics hub that everyone in Jamaica can understand. Indeed, when I say coastal, no, Mr. Speaker, I skipped a little bit, but part of it is that if you develop, we're not changing the environment, you know. There's a big talk about the environment before I come to specific issues. If Kingston was just being developed today, I'm sure some people would object to using what was some of the most fertile plains, the Ligani Plains, to build houses on. Kingston is the central city. Development changed the environment. What we have to do is ensure that the benefits we derive from it are supersedes any loss that is made. Coastline development is what's going to be critical. If you go for a significant global logistics center, not only the corporate area and Berta and Kingston Port and Goat Island will evolve, other centers could begin to get development, whether for dry docking or a place like Mackerel Bay in Clarendon and elsewhere, which are near to Vernon Field, and even the West. We therefore have to ensure that we just don't get overexcited about what will happen to the coastline. Built environment is part of human development. What we have to do is use the additional resources we made earn to protect some of the pristine areas that we want to keep as samples of what we were then. You know, you might want to build a tree house somewhere, but we're not going to live in tree houses. And indeed, places like the Blue Mountain, which is not only a Blue Mountain, Jonker Mountain area, not only a prime environmental area, but it's critical to our water supply, need to be protected. Part of the challenge we face today, the cockpit country as well, In the east and west, they are like the lungs of the country. But part of our problem, Mr. Speaker, is that we speak about environmentally protected areas, but we're doing precious nothing to protect them, because we don't have the resources. We don't have the manpower or the money. If we pursued major development programs that bring about increased wealth in the country, we should then define those areas and put in place effective protective measures for these areas that they know when we say it's an environmentally protected area, it is an environmental area that is protected and retained in its pristine form. And there are a number of them we can speak to, Mace River and Upper Clarendon and so forth, which we need to protect. We don't have the resources to do it now. And much of the debate we have about is merely a debate. That is the value of the debate, quite frankly. But come back to the corporate area and this global logistic concept, we need to put in place, Minister, the required legislation, which have been spoken to by a number of my colleagues in this House, both to my right and left. Increase the activity of ship registration. For maritime service in general can become a major part of the economic activity of the corporate area if we go in this direction. Not only ship registration, insurance, bunkering, international financial services. The nature of international financial centers are changing because of the different new regulations to prevent laundering, but there's still room for expanded international financial services. What we need is the legislation and the regulatory framework, and we need those now, not tomorrow. Legal services. Dry docking will have to be outside, but again, the corporate area and St. Catherine has the critical mass of professionals and skills that is needed to begin this process now. We need to move quickly and assiduously to create the kind of development plan that will attract the investment we need to begin to move Jamaica forward. One day, soon, we hope to sit there, but we don't want to inherit a bankrupt country. I'm sure our minister, none of us on this side want that. Let us understand, in concluding, Mr. Speaker, that we often refer to Singapore. And I'd like to point out that Singapore, when they came in 1964, we were at about the same level in per capita income. They moved decisively and efficiently to develop the economy along the, right?
Again, your comment is that
It was said. Without an opposition, but on this, as I said on this note, we are at one and the civil parliament system. But irrespective of the hindrances, their per capita income today runs somewhere near $55,000 US per head. We are still struggling below 5. Now, I don't expect in our lifetime to reach anywhere near $55,000. But, Mr. Speaker, you understand if we reach $10,000 per capita per head, our debt becomes insignificant and the entire character of our country changes. That's not an over-ambitious achievement or plan. 10,000 US per head is small time. Barbados is at 18. We have sat down, dilly-dallied, and pursued programs incompetently and inefficiently, lacking direction, and kept the country in poverty. Poverty is not poverty. To remove poverty, Mr. Speaker, is not poverty relief. It's to generate growth in the economy, maintain a stable economic framework, grow the economy, and allow people with skills to earn the kind of money that they need to live a better quality of life. That, Mr. Speaker, is the challenge. I have not, in fact, offered any panacea or fan of magic bullet. What I have presented, Mr. Speaker, is a number of ideas that can stimulate growth without impacting on our fiscal accounts. This side is fully aware of the need for stable macroeconomic parameters. Some of the programs I'd like to quote from former distinguished member of the House and say are impatient of debate. They need no debate. Let's move on. Others may need some study. But what we are seeking to bring to the fore a genuine program and concept that can drive private sector development in Jamaica's economy and bring about hope to our people and provide opportunities for increased wealth. No single action can solve this. We need to do this is to think out of the box. What we need to do is to think out of the box and provide a policy framework to ensure efficiency and facilitation of private capital. Private capital has to be the driving force. And we have to make government more efficient by providing a better legislative framework and a regulatory framework that accepts that individuals who have money will invest it if the atmosphere is right. They'll make a profit, but in the process they will create jobs and create opportunities for others. Absolutely nothing is wrong with that. The housing sector, Mr. Speaker, already has a private-public partnership policy. Use it. But the country needs a broader policy to provide a satisfactory framework for private sector to participate in all public infrastructure programs. I want to reiterate that infrastructure lays the foundation for sustainable development. We maintain that Jamaica needs a holistic plan to ensure not only development of the infrastructure, however, but sustainable economic development. And party leader will speak more, the opposition leader will speak more to that in this presentation. We need to design the right programs to give the people the opportunities they seek. Our nation has the talent, the commitment to Jamaica and the capital. We as politicians need to provide the policies and framework to allow the enterprise and creativity of our people to move the country forward. And there's a significant responsibility on the part of the government to lead in that way. We on this side will offer the suggestion and the ideas, but the government must begin the process now. We need leadership that is free of the colonial legacy, post-independence leadership that is knowledgeable of modern technology, understand the nuances of social media and education. We have such a leader, and a leader that has the confidence to challenge the status quo and orthodoxy of multilateral agencies, which in many cases have been the cause of persistent poverty in developing countries like ours. We can be wealthy. We will be wealthy. Our people have the talent and the skill. We need the leadership and a new direction to unleash the potential of Jamaicans. It is possible. Mr. Speaker, may God bless us all as we strive to bring prosperity to our people, equal rights and justice to all Jamaicans. That's the mission of this generation. I thank you.